Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wassalam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So alhamdulillah, today is the 90th session, and inshallah ta'ala we are just finishing up. We just finished the battle of Banu Mustaliq of Muraysee, and we just a quick review. This was in the 5th year of Hijri in the month of Sha'ban. And we talked about how the battle was very easy. The Muslims defeated them very easily, took them as slaves, basically, as was the custom of that time. The winning army would take the losing army, they would take them as slaves. So we know that the Prophet ﷺ, when he married one of them from the Bani Mustaliq, her name was Juwayriyah, radiallahu anha, she was the daughter of the leader. She was the daughter of the leader, and we talked about how the Prophet ﷺ married her, and as a result of that, the Sahaba had released all their prisoners. All the prisoners of war were released because they were relatives of the Prophet ﷺ now, and the Sahaba said, how can we hold the relatives of the Prophet ﷺ as our slaves or as our prisoners? So they freed them. So a large number of the Banu Mustaliq became Muslim after the marriage of the Prophet ﷺ to Juwayriyah radiallahu anha. Then we talked about how a fight broke out between the Muhajirin and the Ansar on the way back. So as they were camped, they were stopped at one point, and two of the young Sahaba from each side went to get the water. And now Allah alam what exactly, how it started, what exactly happened, but they basically got into an argument. One of the Sahaba, the one from Muhajirin, his name was Jahja radiallahu anh, he actually kicked the Sahabi from the Ansar, and then he fought back or whatever happened, and it started into a fight. Now we learned that they started calling out, they said, Ya lal Muhajirun, Ya lal Ansar. They started calling out to their basically their people, and this basically a huge argument was about to start, or a huge fight was about to start. And when the Prophet ﷺ heard, he came out immediately and he said, Da'ha fa innaha muntina, that this is very disgusting, and this is a very foul smell coming from this, or this is a very disgusting act, so leave this. And this was what he was referring to as this call of Jahiliyyah, calling to your people, calling towards your nations, calling towards your other than the Brotherhood of Islam, because we are Muslims, and after Islam there is no other types of groups or within the Muslims. So he basically told them that leave this is from the Jahiliyyah, this is disgusting. And the Sahaba at that time, they all calmed down and they went back to their tents. Now we also talked about how Abdullah ibn Ubay, the Ra'is al-Munafiqun, and again at that time he wasn't known as an open hypocrite. It wasn't known that his hypocrisy was not known. So he actually was in his gathering when he found out what happened. He couldn't keep his mouth shut, so he actually said some words, really disgusting words, against the Prophet ﷺ, against the Sahaba. So when he said that, one of the Sahaba present, a young Sahabi by the name of Zayd ibn Arqam radiallahu anh, he was present, and he went immediately, he told his father or his uncle, and who then took him to the Prophet ﷺ, and they told him what Abdullah had said. Now when Abdullah was summoned, he came and he swore, he said, I swear to Allah, I did not say such things. I did not say these things. And this is one thing very, very dangerous, is that we see a lot of young people, a lot of Muslims in our age, where they use the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they say, Wallahi, Billahi, I swear I didn't do this. And they're openly lying. And this is one of the traits of the munafiqeen, one of the traits of the hypocrites, that they openly swear and lie. And not only that, they use the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do that. So we have to be careful from this, and this is a very disgusting act, or a very evil act, to even use the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to try to back up your lie. Now, the Prophet ﷺ dismissed it basically, because it was basically the word of Abdullah ibn Ubay against the word of the Sahabi Zayd ibn Arqam radiallahu anh. So he basically dismissed it, and the people went back. So the Prophet ﷺ, instead he said that order ordered so Umar Radhan, he became very upset when he heard about this, and he said, Ya Rasulullah, order someone or order me to go and take the head of Abdullah ibn Ubay. And Rasulullah responded by saying that the people will say, what will the people say? They will say that Rasulullah kills his own people. So I don't want that to be said. And he said, instead, tell the people, let's go. Tell the army that we will march. Now, it was a time when the Sahaba and the Prophet would usually not march. What they would do is, they would travel in the evening time, they would travel, and in the morning time up to when it gets very hot, and then they would stop, they would get shade, and they would rest. Like throughout the day they would rest, and then when it gets evening time again, they would start marching again. Now the Prophet ﷺ ordered them to march when it was a time where it was a time for resting. And Usayd ibn Hudayr radhiyallahu anhu, one of the Sahaba from the Ansar, he comes to the Prophet ﷺ and he says, Ya Rasulullah, لَقَدْ رُحْتَ فِي سَاعَةٍ مُنْكِرَةٍ لَمْ تَكُنْ تَرُوحُ بِمِثْلِهَا. The Usayd radhiyallahu anhu says that, Ya Rasulullah, you're ordering us to march in a time where you usually don't march. You don't usually travel at this time. Like he's coming to ascertain as what is the reason behind this. And the Prophet ﷺ responds by saying that, don't you know what your sahib, your people from the Ansar or from Medina, your person, what did he say? And he said, what did he say, or which one are you talking about? And Rasulullah ﷺ says, Abdullah ibn Ubay. And what did he say? He said that the people who are honored will take out and banish from Medina Munawwara the people who are ignoble or without honor. And Usayd ibn Hudayr radhiyallahu anhu, when he says this, he says, responding to this, he says, فَأَنْتَ وَاللَّهِ يَا رَسُولُ اللَّهِ تُخْرِجُهُ إِذَا شِئْتَ. He said that if you wish, you can take him out at any time. Like order us and we'll take him out of Medina. We'll take him out, we'll banish him from Medina for saying such words. And he says, هُوَ وَاللَّهِ الذَّلِيلُ وَأَنْتَ الْعَزِيزُ يَا رَسُولُ اللَّهِ. He is the one who is without honor and you are the one of honor. And then he goes on to say that basically, urfaq bi, say, have some leniency towards him basically. And then he responds, he said that, before you came, he was about to become the king of Medina, and he feels jealous. He feels like he was basically shunned and he was moved aside, and that you have taken his position. So he basically explains the situation to the Prophet ﷺ. Now, some things about when they started going, the Prophet ﷺ, again, the hikmah behind leaving at that such time was that so the people will not keep talking about, if they're sitting idle, sitting around talking, resting, they might start bringing up the topic again about the fight that broke out, about what Abdullah ibn Ubay said. All these things might start. So the Prophet ﷺ said that let's start moving, let's march. So they started moving, and as they were moving, there was some unusual things that happened. For example, while there's a hadith from Muslim Ahmad, Jabir ibn Abdullah radhiyallahu anhu, he says that we were with the Prophet ﷺ, and he says, فَارْتَفَعَتْ رِيحٌ جِيفَةٌ muntina. He said that a very disgusting smell came, and jifa is like a corpse. So like the smell, like a foul smell, like when it's a rotting corpse, how disgusting and how bad the smell is. So he said that a smell came all of a sudden upon us, and the Prophet says, "Atadrun ma hadhihi rih?" Do you know what this smell is, and what the stench is? And he said, "Hadhihi rihu alladhina yaqtabun al-mu'minin." This is the stench of the people who are doing ghiba of the mu'minin. So the Prophet explained that this is the smell coming from their ghiba. And there's actually from Khasais al-Kubra by Imam Suyuti rahimahullah a similar hadith under the heading of the miracles during Banu Mustaliq. And he says a similar story. Another report by Jabir ibn Abdullah is actually later on when they were about to approach Medina. He says that a foul stench came upon us all of a sudden, and the Prophet ﷺ informed them that it was a death of a hypocrite. And when they actually entered into Medina, they actually found out that one of the senior people from the Munafiqeen had passed away in Medina. He had died in Medina, and this stench was coming because of that hypocrite. Now also we learn that the bad deeds cause the angels to be disgusted by us or from us. So for example, Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, he says that the Prophet ﷺ says, إِذَا كَذَبَ الْعَبْدِ. So when a person lies, تَبَاعَدَ عَنْهُ الْمَلَكِ مِيلًا مِنْ نَتْنِ مَا جَاءَ بِهِ. So the malak, the angel, moves away from this person 1 mile away because of the stench and the odor, the foul odor and smell that is coming from the lie that that person has said. Sufyan ibn Uyayna rahimahullah also says that when a person does a good deed, a good beautiful fragrance emanates from that person, and when the person does a sin, then the foul and disgusting smell comes from that person. Again, this is something that sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes zahir for the people, and sometimes we can smell that and we can see that. For example, when someone is buried in a grave, okay, and it's a pious person, sometimes you might smell a fragrance coming from the grave. Okay, again, this is from the ghaib, and this is something Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sometimes teaches, or to teach us a lesson, or to give us bushra. He gives us these things, or lets us feel these things or smell these things. Also, Wahib ibn Munabbah rahimahullah, he used to say that لا يموت عبد حتى يرى الملكين الكاتبين. So a person does not die until they see the two angels that write their deeds. So the angels that are sitting, the katibain, one on the right and one on the left, the one on the right writes our good deeds, and the one on the left writes our bad deeds. So he says that a person will not die until they see those two angels. فَإِن صَحِبَهُمَا بِخَيْرٍ. So if the person was good and would do good deeds, قَالَ, they say to him, جَزَاكَ اللَّهُ خَيْرًا. They say to him that may Allah reward you because you basically helped us by doing good deeds. You did not make us witness or go through the foul stenches and stuff. So basically they say Jazakallah min sahibi khaira, that thank you for doing all those good deeds. And he's فَنِعْمَ sahib kunt. He said, you were such a good person. فَكَمْ أَحْضَرْتَنَا مَعَكْ فِي مَجَالِسِ الْخَيْرِ. How many times you had allowed us to accompany you in these majalis of khair, in good company, in good sittings, you could say. Okay, وَكَمْ شَمَمْنَا مِنْكَ رَوَاحِيَ طَيِّبًا. And how many times we smelled good fragrances coming from you. حَالَ طَاعَتِكَ الْخَالِصَةِ. From when you were doing your ta'ah, when you were obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you were sincere to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, this could be in the middle of the day or it could be in the middle of the night. When a person is doing any sincere act for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again, the beautiful smell emanates from that person's body. So these angels are saying that how many times we smelled this good smell coming from you because you were doing good deeds. But if, on the other hand, if it's an evil person, the angels, they come and they said, لا جزاك الله عنا من صاحب خيرا. They said that this is not, you are not a person who was doing good. And may Allah not give you good, not reward you for what you have done. He says, فَكَمْ أَحْضَرْتَنَا مَعَكَ حَالَ مَعَصِيكَ. That how many times when you were doing the ma'asi, when you were doing the sins and disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you forced us to come and be a witness to that. You forced us to be there. وَكَمْ شَمَمْنَا مِنْكَ رَاحِيَةً نَتٍ. That how many times we smelled foul stench coming from you because of the sins that you were doing. So Allah protect us all. This is that, again, when we do good, we will inshallah emanate a good smell, and the angels will do that. And we know that after we pass away, from the hadith, the authentic hadith, that when a good person passes away, the believer passes away, the angels of mercy come to that person and wearing clean, beautiful clothing and good smelling clothing, and then in their hand they have silk from Jannah, silky clothing, and they take the ruh of this person, and it has beautiful smell coming from it, and the angels are basically pulling it from each other, saying, it's my turn now, let me hold this soul. So they're pulling from each other, kind of almost fighting over who can hold the soul, and they do this until the person's soul goes up to the heavens. So Allah protects us and make us from the people who from the good smells emanate from them, inshallah ta'ala. Now, on the way, when they're traveling, when they're marching, the Prophet was telling the Sahabi to hurry. If they would stop for any break, it would be a very short break, and then they would continue on. So it wasn't like they would have time. And then we're going to learn what happened on this journey, inshallah. Next class, we'll learn about the story of the ifk and how that hurry and that traveling in a hurry actually was part of that, or that was how it came about. So now the Surah Munafiqun was revealed on the way, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he calls Zayd ibn Arqam. So that child, Zayd ibn Arqam radhiyallahu anhu, he actually narrates himself. He says that when I heard what happened and I told the Prophet ﷺ, and then Abdullah ibn Ubay came and he did half, and he basically swore that he did not say these things. He says the Prophet ﷺ dismissed the case basically. So I looked bad in front of everyone. Everyone thought that he's just a child. He misheard what Abdullah ibn Ubay said, and Abdullah ibn Ubay is a respected member of our community. He's an older man. So this child, how could you take a witness of a child against this older elderly man? And Zayd ibn Arqam radhiyallahu anhu, he says that I felt so depressed because the Prophet ﷺ, he said that the Prophet ﷺ, I thought that the Prophet ﷺ had basically he dismissed my witness or my testimony, and that he does not believe. He thinks that maybe I told a lie. So he said I felt so depressed after this, and he said that while we're traveling, the Prophet ﷺ called for me, and he says that the Prophet ﷺ said to him that he basically smiles at him. And Rasulullah says, Inna Allah qad saddaqak ya Zayd. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has affirmed your testimony. That what you said earlier, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed ayat and has affirmed that you are telling the truth. And also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed, again, the wording of Abdullah bin. So it was the Surah Munafiqun. Actually, it's a beautiful surah talking about the different traits of the hypocrites. And that's something that's another time. It's a whole, need a detailed tafsir of that. But basically, some of the things I'll talk about inshallah today. One of them was the words of Abdullah ibn Ubay. So his exact words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put them in the Quran. يَقُولُونَ لَإِن رَجَعْنَا إِلَى الْمَدِينَةِ لَيُخْرِجَنَّ الْأَعَزُّ مِنْهَا الْأَذَلُّ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this is what they would say. And this is the words of Abdullah ibn Ubay. So again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this is what they said. وَلِلَّهِ الْعِزَّةُ وَلِرَسُولِهِ وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَلَكِنَّ الْمُنَافِقِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. That Izzah truly belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He decides who is the honored one, and He is the one who gives Izzah. Al-Mu'izz, that's one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the one who gives Izzah, gives honor, and it's for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's for Rasul and it's for the mu'mineen. But the munafiqeen, la ya'lamun, they don't understand, they don't comprehend, and they don't know this. Now, the Prophet ﷺ says to Zayd ibn Arqam radhiyallahu anh, he says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has affirmed what you said, and also he playfully grabbed the ear of Zayd ibn Arqam radhiyallahu anh. He said, هَذَا الَّذِي أَوْفَى لِلَّهِ بِأُذُنِي. He says that this is the one, meaning this Sahabi, this young boy, has fulfilled what he has heard for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with his ears. So he basically affirming that you have told the truth. And Zayd radhiyallahu anh, again, he was in a state of distraught. He was depressed because he was thinking that everyone thinks I'm a liar, but he knew what he heard, and he had told the Prophet ﷺ what exactly he heard. And now, alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed the ayat affirming his truthfulness. And again, this is similar to, again, from the ayat from Surah Nur, what we'll be talking about after, during the ifk, the slander of Aisha radhiallahu anha, Ummina Aisha radhiallahu anha, and the slander, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed ayat to affirm her innocence and her sidq and her truthfulness. So going on, now Surah Munafiqun, like I said, Abdullah ibn Ubay, he was the head of the Munafiqeen, and again his nifaq was not known openly. So basically, before the Battle of Badr, we talked about this before, that before the Battle of Badr, you had three groups. You had the Jews of Medina, you had the Muslims of Medina, and then you had the Mushrikeen of Medina. Okay, so you have the Jews again and the Mushrikeen, and then on the other side you have the Muslims. So the mushrikeen, after the battle of Badr, there was no mushrikeen anymore. Either they became Muslim and then they formed a new group, or they formed a new group, which was the munafiqeen. So the mushrikeen became Muslim, or they formed a new group and they became part of a new group, which was the munafiqeen. Abdullah ibn Ubay was one of these. Now, one of the things that's amazing about Abdullah ibn Ubay is that he had two children, a son and daughter, and they were both mu'min, and they were both righteous believers. Now, his son's name is Abdullah, just like his father's name, Abdullah ibn Ubay. That's the son, and then the daughter, her name was Jamila bint Abdullah. So Jamila, radiallahu anha, she was a Sahabiya, and she was a righteous Muslim. And we talked about her in the battle of Uhud. And you remember her husband passed away in the battle of Uhud. What was his name? Hanzala ibn Abi Amir, and anybody remember what's his nickname? What's he known for? Yes. Barakallahu feek. Yes, he's the Ghasil al-Malaika. Okay, he's the one that was honored by being washed by the Malaika. After the battle was over, the Sahaba saw water falling from the body, and they wondered. They went to the Prophet. They said, "No one washed his body. What's going on with his water all over his body? It's like he just was given a bath." The Prophet said that the Malaika are washing his body. And then they went to find out, and they found out that Jamila, radiallahu anha, the wife, they were married the night before. The night of the battle they were married, and this is the daughter of Abdullah ibn Ubay, married to the son of Abu Amir. Abu Amir was actually another kafir. He had actually he didn't stay in Medina and become a munafiq, he actually left Medina. So he was mushrik, but he said instead of staying in Medina, he just left Medina and went to Makkah, to live in Makkah, because he was, in his eyes, he was like, I can't live with these Muslims, so he went to Makkah, and we talked about that. So anyways, Ghasil al-Malaika, Hamdallah radiallahu anhu, was the husband of Jamila radiallahu anha. Okay, so he passed away, he was shaheed in the battle of Uhud. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the amazing thing that, like I said, is that Abdullah ibn Ubay was such a big munafiq, was such a big hypocrite, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, يخرج الحي من الميت ويخرج الميت من الحي. Okay, or it's the other way around, right? يخرج الميت من الحي ويخرج الحي من الميت. I forgot the ayah, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes out from the dead, takes the living out of the dead, and takes the dead out of the living. And again, we see Abdullah ibn Ubay, the Rais al-Munafiqeen, and his son and daughter were righteous Muslims. Now, one occasion, and this is before the battle of Badr, okay, where he was still a mushrik, Abdullah was still a mushrik, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to the gathering. So he was sitting with his people, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came by. I believe he was riding a donkey, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he came close, there was some ghubar, the dust flew, and there was a smell coming from the donkey. So and even if there wasn't a smell, but Abdullah ibn Ubay, he covered his face, covered his nose, and he says, "Ghabbara alayna ibnu Abi Kabsha." He says, this is one of the nicknames of the Prophet ﷺ that they would call him, because this is referring back to his time in Banu Sa'd when he was a young child. And anyway, so he says that he has thrown this dust on us, and there's this foul smell coming. So don't come to our gatherings with this foul smell. He actually said this to the Prophet ﷺ. And this shows how batamiz he was, and how how he used to talk to the Prophet ﷺ. And he says that basically he came to us, and Abdullah ibn Ubay, again this is the son of Abdullah ibn Ubay. At that occasion, he came to the Prophet ﷺ. He says, "Ya Rasulullah, walladhi akramaka la in shi'ta la ataytuka bi ra'si." He said that if you wish, just give me the command, I will go bring the head of my father. I will go kill him, and I'll bring the head of my father if you just give me the order. Again, this is showing his iman and his belief that even though he loved his father, and it's not like he hated his father, he actually, and we'll talk about that in a second, he loved his father, and he was one of the most righteous children to his father, and obedient to his father. And he says that but his love for the Prophet was greater, and he says, if you just ask me to, I will bring his head. The Prophet says, "La walakin birra abak wa ahsan suhbata." But instead, be good to him and treat him well and basically be good to him. Now, I talked about how Abdullah ibn Ubay became munafiq after the battle of Badr, and we know that during the battle of Uhud, so this is 1 year after the battle of Badr, he turned back the morning of the battle. He turned back with 300 of his followers. So this is openly, he took his people and he just went back, and he was openly trying to, discourage the Muslims, and right before the battle he did this, and he was basically using the excuse. He says that Rasulullah ﷺ did not take my advice. So I'm basically like a little baby. He's upset that the Prophet ﷺ did not take his advice. So I'm going to go back. He took 300 of his followers and went back. Another thing that's mentioned is, and this is actually one of the ayat of Surah Munafiqeen that's revealed, is that when it's said to them that go to the Prophet ﷺ and ask him to do istighfar on your behalf, and they say no, I'm not going to do it, or I'm not going to go back to the Prophet ﷺ. And what the sabab nuzul of that ayah, or the reason behind that ayah, is that Abdullah ibn Ubay would stand up before the khutbah, on Jumu'ah khutbah, before the Prophet ﷺ would come out and give the khutbah. Abdullah ibn Ubay would stand up, and he would basically stand up in the middle of the gathering, and he would tell the people, come closer, sit down, listen, the Prophet ﷺ is about to come, he's going to give a khutbah. So he's basically giving an introduction to the Prophet ﷺ. So he would do this, and no one would say anything, because again, he was a well-respected person from the people of Medina. And after the Battle of Uhud, when they saw that he had taken 300 of his followers, he actually stood up one day and he started saying, come closer. And one of the Sahaba said, get out of here. We don't need you to introduce the Prophet ﷺ, and we don't want to listen. Just sit down where you are. So when they acted like this, he became very upset and furious, and he actually started walking out of the masjid, leaving the gathering, leaving Jumu'ah khutbah, because someone had dishonored him in this way. And when he left, the people standing there, they told him that, what are you going, why are you so upset? Why don't you instead go to the Prophet ﷺ and ask him to forgive you, and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive you? And instead he said, I swear by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I will never ask him to forgive me, or ask him to ask forgiveness on my behalf. So he swears like this, and that's one of the ayahs from Surah Munafiqun. Now when they're traveling and the ayat are revealed, the news spreads throughout the army that the ayat have revealed, Surah Munafiqun was revealed. So now everyone knows his hypocrisy is open now, because now the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showing his hypocrisy. And the son, Abdullah ibn Ubay, he comes to the Prophet ﷺ as they're traveling, and he says, Ya Rasulullah, he says, it has reached me that you want to kill my father. That you want to kill my father because of his nifaq. He knows his father is not Muslim. So he says that it's reached me that you want to kill him. فَإِن كُنْتَ فَاعِلًا. So if you are to do that, if you are to kill my father, فَمُرْنِي بِهِ. He says, then order me to do it. Order me to kill my father. And he explains why. He says, فَأَنَا أَحْمِلُ إِلَيْكَ رَأْسَ. I will bring his head to you. فَوَاللَّهِ لَقَدْ عَلِمَتَ الْخَزْرَجِ. That the Khazraj, from the people from Madinah Munawwara, that they know مَا كَانَ فِيهَا رَجُلٌ أَبَرَّ بِوَالِدِهِ مِنِّي. There is no one more righteous and more obedient to their father than me. From the people of Medina, there is no one more righteous and more obedient to their father than I am to my father. So he says that وَإِنِّي أَخْشَى. But I fear that if you order someone else from the Sahaba to go and kill my father, he says, then I will see that when the person who killed my father is walking around in the streets of Medina, فَلَا تَدَعْنِي نَفْسِي أَنْ أَنظُرَ إِلَى قَاتِلِ عَبْدِ اللَّهِ بِنْ أُبَيْ. He says that I wouldn't be able to bear that the killer of my father is walking around in the street. So he says, فَأَقْتُلَ. So then I would probably go and kill him. That when I see the killer of my father, I would go and kill this person. فَأَقْتُلُ مُؤْمِنًا بِكَافِرٍ. And then as a result of that, I would have killed a mu'min as a result of a kafir. And he's talking about his father as the kafir. So I would have killed a mu'min in lieu of a kafir. فَأَدْخُلَ النَّارِ. And I'm afraid I will do that and I would enter the hellfire because of that. So he says, ask me to do it, don't ask anybody else. If you are to do it, ask me to do it, and I'll go and do it right away. The Prophet ﷺ instead responds, بَلْ نَرْفُقْ بِهِ وَنُحْسِنُ صُحْبَتَهُ مَا بَقِيَ مَعَنَا. The Prophet ﷺ says, بَلْ نَرْفُقُ بِهِ, that basically we're gonna treat him in a good way. وَنُحْسِنُ صُحْبَتَهُ, meaning that we will be good to him and will be a good companion to him, مَا بَقِيَ مَعَنَا, as long as he is with us. Now, the Prophet ﷺ says this to Abdullah ibn Ubay, and the son of Abdullah ibn Ubay, he goes forward. Now he knows, okay, the Prophet doesn't want to take the head of my father, but he's still in anger over what his father has said. So he goes forward and he stands at the Bab of Medina, he stands at the gate of Medina, so where they would enter into Medina from. So he stands there, takes out his sword, and he waits for his father to come. Now when his father comes, he stops the camel of his father, he forces his father to get off the camel, and he forces him to get on the ground, and he puts the sword to the face of his own father. And he says to him that, he says basically stay here. He says, قِفْ فَوَاللَّهِ, I swear by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لَن تَدْخُلَهَا حَتَّى يَأْذُنَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم فِي ذَلِكَ. I will not allow you to enter into Medina until the Prophet allows you to enter into Medina. So he stops his father, puts it, and also he orders him, another riwayah, he orders him to admit that he is from the Adal. He is the one who is ignoble or without any honor, and that the Prophet ﷺ is the one who is honored. So he forces his father to say these words, and then when the Prophet ﷺ comes and passes, he says, okay, allow him to go enter into Medina, and then he allows him to go in. So this is the son of Abdullah ibn Ubay, Abdullah ibn Ubay, and you see that radiallahu anhu, how much he loved the Prophet ﷺ, and he honored the Prophet ﷺ over the honor of his own father. And this is something that the Prophet ﷺ has said in the hadith, that لا يؤمن أحدكم, that you will not become a true believer until you love me more than you love yourself and your family and everyone. وَالنَّاسِ أَجْمَعِينَ, unless you love everyone, love me more than everyone. And this is truly a show of that love that the Sahaba had for the Prophet ﷺ. So we'll stop there inshallah ta'ala. Next week we'll not have class, I'm going to be traveling inshallah, but the week after inshallah when we come back, we'll start on the story of the Ifk, when they get back to Medina Munawwara and what happens after that. جزاكم الله خير. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.